Good morning and welcome to News Check. My name is Abdiaziz Hashim. The sign language interpreter is Lensa Odingo. This morning we have a good discussion for you in the first hour as well as in the second hour. In the first hour, we'll be focusing on the affirmative action programs to ensure equal opportunities for the minorities and marginalized groups in the country. While joining us on set will be elite fellows from the minority groups ahead of the Minorities Day come August, and of course in the upcoming conference that will bring them all together from all walks of life later this year. That will be on December. That will be our focus this morning. My guests are already seated. Also, in the second hour, we'll be focusing on the Finance Bill 2024 as well as the budget. Remember that the Finance Committee led by Molo Member of Parliament, that is Kimani Kuria, conducted or concluded their public participation exercise yesterday at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. This afternoon, they will be meeting with various cabinet secretaries, including the man who proposes some of the issues that have been raised within the finance bill, that is Professor Njuguna Ndugu, who is also expected come Thursday to present the 4.006 trillion budget to Parliament, of course the highest in our history. That is all we have for you, but also we'll be talking to our reporters on field on various stories that are making headlines. Also, we'll be having our reporters stationed at Parliament buildings for various other committee sessions. We do understand that the Parliament Health Committee of the National Assembly will be conversing with the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers to try and end this particular stalemate between them and the government. We'll be briefing you on that as well, and we have other stories that are making headlines. We'll duly catch up with our reporters to inform us or brief us, given that this is our mandate. Talk to us on our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1 and at Abdiaziz Hashim 1. Now to it, on our first hour, we are focusing on the affirmative action programs. As I told you, I'm being joined by elite fellows from the minority groups ahead of the Minorities Day come August, and they will have a major conference that will bring them together at the Bomas of Kenya on December. Let me start to get to introduce them. On my immediate left, that is Mr. Eric Kimalit, the community elder within the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities of Kenya. Karibu sana, Mr. Eric.
Thank you.
And the gentleman in the middle, that is their chair. That is Mr. Charles Nadian. Have I said it correctly? Nadain. Thank you, sir, for the correction. He is the chair of the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities of Kenya. And the man adorned with the attire, he will explain to us why he has decided to wear like that this morning, is none other than Dr. Chris Galgalo, an educationist, also a member of the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities of Kenya. Protocol demands that I should start with the chair. Let's get to start with the chair. Chair, thank you for joining us and making time for us on this particular broadcast. The first question will be, who are these marginalized communities?
The marginalized communities are, as is directed in Article 260, it describes who the marginalized communities are and who the marginalized groups are. The marginalized groups have these characteristics. They are in the minority, they are fewer in population. Nationally, the indigenous found in a particular place. They profess their own cultural interests, which they will not want to be diminished. And they seek recognition. So all those, and they practice, they have cultural practices that are unique to them, like Katharas, like pastoralists, and they are mostly rural-based, and that is how the Constitution has described who the marginalized.
Yes.
These people are also vulnerable. It's not said, but because of the nature of who they are, they find themselves in a vulnerable position in such a way because of their numbers. Then they find themselves that they cannot participate effectively in terms of perhaps they cannot even form a ward constituency. So you find that they are not represented in county government, they are not represented in parliament. And so you find that these are marginalized, and therefore decisions are made about them without their voice. And so without their voice, they always find themselves at the margin. So the marginalized is a general. You find that women could be majority, as they say, but they are marginalized in a sense that because of the cultural practices and where we mainstream, you find that there are fewer. And that's why there are laws in place that they are supposed, the laws that protect them so that they are in places where they are supposed to be. Okay. There are some ethnic communities, they are small in their numbers, population-wise, and because of that, it also calls that they are supposed to be given some affirmative action laws that will make them to participate.
Okay. Dr. Galgalo, I'm coming to you. Also, you can brief to our viewers the attire that you're donned. Plus, given that you're an educationist, you have been in this field. So what gaps, especially in the education sector, has the minorities groups been able to achieve to address some of the myriad of challenges that the chair is raising? Okay,
thank you very much. First of all, just to add on what he said,
yes,
is marginalization means, in short term, exclusion from the mainstream of the government, of the communities, or any targeted policy. That's an exclusion. So according to their numbers, according to some people, it's not benefiting them in any way. So they are excluded totally in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of social amenities, in terms of political representation, and what have you. So this is an exclusion which we are really fighting for. Then secondly, the attire is the identity of my community. The attire, the dress you put on, signifies the identity of your community. I come from YU community, whose identity, according to the cultural attires, is the way I've dressed. And again, I am the leader of that community nationwide. Yes. So as a king or as a chairperson or as a president, for that matter, I have to dress uniquely. Yes. So this is one of a representation of my identity as a community. Yes. Thirdly, coming to your question about education, I remember one time Nyerere said that when they got independence, he said, what do you want us to do for you, the people of Tanzania? The people said, you can develop the road, infrastructure, and what have you. But Nyerere said, no, those are the tools for development. The only thing I can develop you through that is education. So education, development comes in forms of education. If the people are empowered, they know their rights. If the people are empowered through education, they know what they stand for, and they will agitate it for their right, and they will fight for their right. But according to the recent data, is that majority of these pastoralist areas, hunters and gatherers, and some fishing folks, they are completely out of education system, because what is targeting them as affirmative action is not bearing any fruit, because nobody was going around to collect the data as concerns the enrollment, because they are subsumed into the larger community. So to signify or to come out with the targeted population of this community in terms of education is very important. If you look at the previous census, 2019, it was mentioning about the poverty rate of a county, the GPD of that country, and what have you. But they have not singled out what is the level of their education, what is their level of poverty rate, what is the level of, whatever it is there. So we have not come out with that data that can address those education. But all in all, they have been completely out of that education system, because some of them are nomads. And fortunately, I was one time the chair of National Council for Nomadic Education. Okay. And they are leading a nomadic life. And so to target them, we came up with a policy. Actually, that was to address, together with UNICEF, and we came up with a policy saying, we take the school to the people, not the school to the, and not the people to school. We take the school to the people. In terms of livelihood, they are leading a nomadic life. So we go with them through a mobile school to reach out to these people. That is the target which we really achieved in terms of educational access, transition, and what have you. I thank also the government because they have come up with affirmative action in form of a boarding school, low-cost boarding school in all those counties where education is inaccessible. So that, particularly the pastoralists, hunters and gatherers, forest dwellers, and what have you, the education, they have established now that boarding school so that they can move with their livestock, but on the other side, they could access education in another way. So the other one is about Elimu scholarship, which the government came up with through the World Bank. They have brought that affirmative action where they said 30% of the minority and marginalized, not only the communities, other marginalized groups like women, gender, or persons with disability is included within this 30%. But the majority of those other people, is still the gap is big because they get 70% and well, we get only 30%, which is not even comparable. So we wanted it as a affirmative action that it should be 50-50 so that we benefit equally, but not to put us at a lesser human being by getting only 30-70 goes to you. Still that gap will exist. And the policy as at now, they are reviewing Basic Education Act for 2024. They want to review the old one, which is 2013 Basic Education Act. Now they are reviewing. But there is a lot of gap also in that review. In fact, I've analyzed, there is a lot of gap, which will disadvantage us even more. I'm sorry to say, it will disadvantage us even more. So some words which is targeting the minority and marginalized has been removed. Now it becomes amorphous. It becomes amorphous. Where we have National Council for Nomadic Education in Kenya, now they have changed it. This is the proposal. It has not yet come to an act. It says National Council for Marginalized Communities. Marginalized communities. National Council for Marginalized Communities. Anybody can come up and say, I'm also marginalized. We are also marginalized. That is not the occupation could define what you are and who you are and where you are. So if you say marginalized communities, it's amorphous. To me, it's amorphous from educational point of view. So you are not targeting a specific group to elevate them to the higher level through equity. If equity is not there, then we are no more. I'm telling you. Thank you.
In essence, Eric, what I want to ask is, where are these marginalized people? How many counties are under these communities? As well, talk to us in some of the issues that have been raised by the Chair and Daktari on those particular challenges that the minorities are currently facing.
Thank you so much. Most of our minorities and marginalized communities come from the ASAL counties. They're also dry counties. And we know that 83% of Kenya is within those regions. We also have some people also like, there is a group which is here in Kiambu. We have some in the coast. We have the Nubians in Nairobi, Kisumu, Ravine, and other places. So they are spread all over the country. Now, I think also one thing I wanted to add to what my colleagues have said is about these, who are these minorities and who are these marginalized, and more so the indigenous. The indigenous, you find that they have a special connection to their land. They have a special connection, even their spirituality, the way they do their things. They specifically attach even to certain mountains, certain hill, the lake, not just the way you can visit as a guest and you just come back, you have seen water and land mass. So special connection to their lands is something very important, and they also have right to their self-determination, because you cannot go and tell water that you are not an indigenous or minority. They have the right, even in the UN charters, you have a right to determine, of self-determination. And about this marginalization, we find that from outside, maybe the education perspective, you realize that we have weak laws, or we have, for example, we have Article 56. Article 56 is affecting 4 groups. You have Article 56A, you have sub-Article B, all the way to, I think, F. And what they have made it legal is the one which is dealing with women. That is why we have a Women Enterprise Fund. So there's a legal instrument through which the government can allocate some resources to those groups. And because they also perceived to be, they needed for affirmative action because they were also marginalized or neglected for a long time. We also have the youth. And in the youth, women first, we have Women Enterprise Fund because there's a law providing for it. They have the gender ministry. This also talking about so much about the women issues, although gender is not about women alone. We have the youth, so at least we have some departments or some which are created by law, which are serving the youth.
Yes.
Another group is we have the people living with disability. They have, I think, a council. They have because there is law which is providing for that. Now it came to the marginalized and minorities, that is E and D and E. Then the Constitution, those sub-articles of the Constitution, Article 6, have never been operationalized because there is no act of parliament to operationalize, and therefore you cannot allocate public funds to those groups the way you can do for women. We have WESO fund, we have people living with disability, they have their own allocation from the National Treasury. So you find that those groups, particularly the one you are talking about, minority and marginalized, nobody has, for all those years, since we even promulgated the new constitution, they have not been able to have a law which is specifically saying or expressly provides for their support by the government. So that is what we need now. And one of the things we are saying is, part of that problem is that we are now marginalized. We don't have somebody of our own, or people of our own, who can champion our rights, even in the legislation forum. So that people always say, we are here to represent the minorities, the indigenous people, but themselves, they are not indigenous. Themselves, they are not marginalized. Themselves, they are not minorities.
Yes.
So it is time we are saying now, there is nothing about us without us.
Okay.
And there are two things. There's a table of decision making where people sit to make high-level decision making tables, and that's what I can call eating. And then you can also be on the menu. These guys around the table are discussing what is on the menu, and the minorities there have been in the menu for a very long time, and therefore it is the stuff which is being eaten. So until and unless we have our own people representing our own interest. Because Abdi, today, if you came to my community, which is Endora, is based mainly in Baringo, around Lake Bogoria, which were dispossessed of their land by the government in 1973, you can just come and see me, you can learn about a few things about us, but you don't know the leaves of that onion which are inside. Maybe you know our attire, our language, but there are certain things you don't know about us. How are we connected to the animals? How are we connected to the sun? How are we connected to the hills, the water, and all that?
Okay.
Our cultural and religious aspects. So we really need to represent ourselves as minorities in the whole country, so that some people may not come and purport to represent us, and therefore in the process they are actually misrepresenting us.
Okay.
So I think that is what is very important. And the other one, lastly, is Article 100. It's about appointive positions and the political positions. For example, the nominations to the county assemblies, nominations to the Senate and the National Assembly, the two houses of Parliament. You find that it has not also been operationalized, so that you can have a specific policy or provision where we can clearly say, now, you as minorities, who are you going to be there? Some people feel their relatives, their friends in those positions because there is no law which is specifically saying who are these people.
Okay.
And that is what we are really vouching for. We want at least the law to provide for that, so that nobody can have another excuse.
Okay, Chair, circling back to you, Daktari talked about some of the interventions the government has made, especially when it comes to affirmative action. What are the other benefits that you have been able to enjoy, or the government has implemented after hearing some of the suggestions that you are making, or what would you like them to do?
First of all, the government, currently, this government is doing a lot of good things in terms of addressing the issue of marginalization. We now have an office,
yes,
under the office of the president,
yes,
which is there to receive such complaints, where it's a place where these people can go to. And last year on 18th December, we all gathered together, all marginalized, ethnic marginalized communities came together, and we celebrated in Bomas. That was a good thing. And the president promised to come up with a task force. I think because of the budgetary issues, that will be done. But he promised that will happen. We are going to do mapping for all. Of course, some of these, as Dr. mentioned, are undiscovered. So as we go out, some of them are hearing for the first time, and then they will start saying, oh, we are also marginalized. And so this kind of sensitization is very good. You are a government institution, and we will say that the government is also doing very well in sensitizing this matter. Issue of marginalization, much of the problem is lack of knowledge. The Constitution has provided rights. It's upon them to claim these rights. We have an office that has been given by the government. There is need for urgency for the members who identify themselves in that category to come up. Like the ones that Kimalik has mentioned. At least women, you can tell gender. This is a woman. If it's somebody living with a disability, he can rise and say, I am this kind of person. But marginalized is a bit tricky, so we need to come up with a framework of even identifying them to differentiate those ones who are really marginalized and those ones who may just want to benefit. Because if it is an open, everybody can come and claim.
yes,
So we can say even the Article 204, which is going to, which was about 20 years, given 20 years, equalization fund. It doesn't focus on people. It focuses on regions, and it has become very political in such a way that it is the counties now that are claiming that my region is, requires this equalization fund. So you cannot pin it down, but it is also a good thing that was brought by the Constitution.
okay,
More of what we need to do is to create awareness, to identify the people, to sensitize them, so that they can claim that right.
okay.
Yeah.
Daktari, aside from the issues that have been raised, we know especially areas like North Rift, Northeastern, the issues of insecurity and the harsh climatic conditions that especially we've even witnessed the floods, and then after a few years or a few weeks we will be seeing some of the devastations of the drought itself. We know education is the silver bullet, but what other mechanisms has this community or these organizations that you represent have done to enable the communities that you represent are able to defend themselves or acclimatize to the situation that is happening around them?
Thank you very much. First, education is in the law and it's compulsory. So it is a government initiative to force that one to come out clearly that everybody must go to school. Two, climatic condition is natural. You cannot control them. But you come up with a mechanism that can sustain you in those dry lanes. And the only suitable things that can improve your economy is proper livestock rearing to keep these people at check. Secondly, on the same is there are many things which are now coming up, which is called agro-pastoralism.
Yes.
People, when there is rain, they catch the rainwater in form of a dam or in form of irrigation. They divert their attention to balance the equation is they do pastoralism as well as agricultural practices to sustain their livelihood. So when there is rain, and some of them have adopted what is called now silage, where they store the grass during the rain and then give it out to the livestock they have. The children are, as affirmative action, as I have said already. When I went to Sudan, Khartoum, North Kordofan, entirely they are practicing what is called pastoralism, like our people. But the government has came up with a mechanism that could target specifically these pastoralist people in terms of teachers training, in terms of curriculum, in terms of personnel, in terms of other facilities that is relevant to boost the economy. So we can adopt that one also to uplift the educational standard in those areas. Even Nigeria has tried mobile school to make these people to access this formal education. And at the same time, the government has done a lot, purposely because infrastructure development is not only to the national government, it is also through constituency development fund. The government has come up with certain percentage that could target education in those arid lands, because it is in the act, and that NGCDF is focusing on education for everybody as a compulsory education system. They have come up with a budget where they can address those issues at county level, constituency level, and what have you. On top of that, also there is bursary from the county government. It is allocated for bursary for those children. So if people come up jointly, even some NGOs are also targeting education for these people. If we put all these things into one basket and we address the education we want, definitely we can make that place to be another Canaan. That is what one time when we were attending a conference with KIPRA, regional conference on Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and in Kilifi, I learned a lot from that Israeli fellow who came up and said we can make desert into highland by changing the whole system, by changing the mindset of the people. And people should come out of those traditional mechanisms where they cannot grow out, and then they impoverish in poverty. So if people are coming out to empower their own people through this political leadership, if they empower their people, they can come out and improve access of education in their own region. It is not only this, but on the other side, even the government through World Bank and other organizations like UNICEF have come up with the Elimo Scholarship. Then we have another equity, wing fly or
Wings
something like that. So it is communities' efforts and the national government effort to come together and improve on this. So if we make use of that affirmative action of Article 56 and we operationalize, this issue will come to diminish, because the only thing that can make us at par with these people is that affirmative action. Affirmative action is to provide equity, not equality. Is equity, to uplift the person who is impoverished down there at the bottom of the society, to come up at the same level with other communities. But if we, like he said, equalization fund is not targeting the community, it is targeting the region. Already we have county devolution, already we have CDF, already we have other donor organization which is targeting the region in terms of billions and billions of money. Why are we not targeting equalization fund in form of equity to this marginalized community, so that they will be at par with other communities within the same region? So a region is not targeting us as a community. Already it is amorphous. The policy is amorphous. The policy is amorphous because it's not targeting the individual community. How do we access or evaluate? Certain community is having high dropout, others are having high enrollment rate. How do you compare and what have you? So I think we need to revisit this policy of equalization fund, and we need also to have a representation, because if nobody is talking about your issue and you are not there, nobody is going to talk about your issue. Because we need to be there so that we say it out. If you don't say it out, who will say it out for you.
Okay.
Because it is you to where the problem is. It is you to say, like now we are saying.
Yes.
So I hope the government and policymakers and other initiators of various projects or NGOs can help us now to minimize or to reduce this gap of disparity among this community in terms of economical setup, in terms of education, in terms of any other social amenities that could address and elevate these people from the bottom to come up to this. The last word is, I remember what Obama said. He said, I will make the poor man to be at equal with the wealthy man. Initially, people thought it is a miracle you are doing, like there, I don't know. But then he said, no, I will not touch the wealth of anybody. He will not touch, he said. But he will come up with a policy that can elevate this poor person to be at par with those people on the same level. I rest my case.
Eric, well said, Daktari there. But Eric, earlier on you said, especially pastoralists, they're very attached to the animals they rear every day. You see Daktari is talking about some of the innovative ways the government as well as other institutions have been able to come up with in terms of agriculture. So as an institution or as an organization or as a representatives of these people, are you sensitizing them on these upcoming issues?
Okay, thank you so much, Abdi. But first of all, let me just start from where you ended before I come to your question. What is so important, even when we talk about those equalization fund, affirmative action, you can still even devolve the marginalization. Because if you talk, for example, like a county, in a county, you say, okay, like say it's Baringo or it's Marsabit, and you find that you say it is an area which requires some affirmative action so that they can be at par with the others. Still, when you go to Marsabit or you go to Baringo or Kilifi, you find that if you don't specifically identify those who are marginalized and the minority there, you will still, the money will be shared. You heard about the Baringo elected MCS recently. They are complaining about the equalization fund in that county because I think it came and it never went through the public participation and nobody knows what's happening. So until what my colleagues are saying is done, so that clearly there's law providing and identifying who are these minorities, then you can still take resources to those counties, but they'll never reach those marginalized. They remain marginalized at that county level. What is very, very important is that we should have social inclusion. That when you are talking about allocation of resources to people you are discussing, the people themselves should be able to participate in decision making. You see, like in CDF, there is what they call in project management committees at primary level, health center, etc. They are the people who will decide what projects they want, they prioritize, and then they're the people who are going to say, we want to have this and this. And they don't get the money particularly. They just participate in a prioritization of these items and the management. The money checks just go to the contractor. That is participation. That is what kind of participation we would like to see in other affirmative action that is coming down to the people. So social inclusion, for as long as we don't have the people represented, the people who are marginalized, the people who are indigenous, the people, then we are not doing anything. We are only shifting that thing from the national level to the county level. Now, coming back to your question to me about the pastoralists or the people in those ASAL areas, I know for one, dry, harsh weather conditions in those areas is not new to them. Even this climate change, it's only worsening, but they have not been in the highlands like people in these, what they call the high potential agricultural areas. You find that they have what you call indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge on how they will even be able to predict rain through the flowering of certain plants, certain months before even you don't see the clouds. So there is that traditional knowledge, which has, because of that marginalization and people being assimilated by other people, they are losing that traditional knowledge, which was very, very handy in terms of preserving the biodiversity and also keeping the animals for their livelihoods. And that is, for instance, now even in the UN, they are talking about the CBD. If you talk about the CBD Convention for Biodiversity, you find that the indigenous and local communities, which are majority of these minorities here in Kenya, you find that they are the only people who are now conserving 80% of complete biodiversity in the whole world, and yet they only occupy 20% of the land mass, and they constitute 5% of the human population of this planet. So why is the world moving towards that? It is because they know that down generations, they were traditional knowledges, the traditional knowledge, and which is back to culture, and it has taste of time. And then people know how, if they can even predict and say, this season, we are going to have floods. Yes. This season, we are not going to grow this maize. The other thing is, we are also telling our people now, because you must have self-identity, because they are losing that because of assimilation by the bigger communities. Yes. So we also we are advocating for our traditional seeds, because we know if it is, you are talking about the, if you go to, you have the sorghum, you have the millet, you have certain grass, which was very resilient, or when it rains, it takes a very short time, it germinates and matures. They're all destroyed, and people are no longer valuing them, because they were made to believe that what would belong to them, or their knowledge or their tradition, was backward and therefore lost. So we are telling them it is good to come back to it so that we can have now. Animals, for example, if you take a Frisian cow to Marsabit or Baringo, where we have war, in the way it's affecting our people in the Baringo site and the rest of the North Rift, you cannot go, and even if you give those people some Frisian cow or Jersey cow, they will die. Partly because of the heat. Number two, the diseases, they cannot resist. And therefore, the heat alone can even make them to produce a lot, and they'll not eat. And you find that there isn't enough for them to eat anyway. But if you tell our people we breed our animals now, the cows, the cattle, the sheep, we breed them so that we have the benefit of that that resistance to, or tolerance to harsh climatic conditions, yes. Then they'll now start saying, oh yeah, we got only ng'ombe ya ushenzi toeni. It is really helping them. It has helped the generations all the way, our forefathers. Okay. So we are now telling them it is good to not to throw away what has served the community for many generations. And we thank the government, because there are so many projects which are coming through the ministries. They are very, like this government have, they are, for example, prioritized the dairy value chain, and also beef, which is common in the 84% of Kenya I talked about earlier. We also have the goats, we have the sheep, and people from the lakes and all the water bodies, they also have the fisheries. So this government has done very well, and I think this is the government, I would say, which is really, it came down to the people. Even during the campaign, His Excellency the President he told everybody wherever we were that now we need, what are your issues? You remember the county economic forums, which informed a lot about the manifesto of this government. And we really thank, there are so many projects, I can't enumerate them here, which we know they're in the pipeline. And we're now, also we have been given an office, and we have this directorate or a unit in this executive office. Yes. And we are now being conducted. Now that inclusion is now coming in, then we expect a lot of things to improve a lot going forward, because all actors, the government and non-government, we are all moving together in the same direction. Okay.
Chair, with this, a Kenyan who's watching us right now will ask, then if there are these challenges still existing till today, what was the essence of devolution? Because the advent of devolution was supposed to solve some of these issues faced in counties. Especially, you can even see the collaboration between the national and the county governments. They're even trying to resuscitate some of the municipalities through the various urban programs they're currently engaged in. So is devolution working, and what can be done to improve it so that it can address some of the challenges the communities are facing?
Thank you for that question. It is a matter of values and the people. The people who are put to be the administrators and leaders in the administration, in the county government, still hold the values which we were expecting to change. For instance, I come from the Bongomek community in Bungoma. Bongomek are the indigenous people, together with the others who are there, And it so happens that the name Bongomek is Bungoma is derived from this community. And but we were surprised at the invention of when now we were implementing devolution in 2013. Bongomek were left out totally in every sphere of life in Bungoma County. And so this community went to court. And the court listened to us. If you listen to the arguments against what we stood for, what we just wanted is recognition that we are also living there and that we deserved to be in that government. And you listen to the arguments that were given by the community, and you listen to the counter argument by the county government, then you will say something, a revolution needs to take place here. The court ruled that these people are minority and marginalized in this county and therefore should be treated as such. The county government went to appeal. And you see, this is a community that is poor. They cannot, going to litigation is very expensive. I'm just giving an example.
Yes.
And that applies almost everywhere where we have these people. So they went to appeal in Kisumu. You know, Bungoma and Kisumu is a big distance. Our lawyer, who was very good, they took him to be part of the panel of the county government panel. So there was conflict of interest. And so the whole term, after 2014, 2019, the government that we were against had elapsed. And so they declared moot. And thereafter they said, okay, the matter that is remaining is the issue of minority and marginalized. And then they said this matter has not been concluded in parliament. So the parliament has not put in place laws that will describe you who you are, so you cannot claim. And say until the government has made those laws, then you cannot claim yourself to be either marginalized or minority, and therefore you can't go to court. We listened to that judgment, and we said, okay, then why was the constitution, why were they put in the constitution in the first place? Yeah. First of all, we felt that that was discrimination for us to go through a long process for us to start realizing our rights. Now, we took the matter to Supreme Court. Now, that was COVID time, so it delayed in technical terms that, you know, we had 60 days for which we were supposed to do this. And so therefore the matter just went silent. Now what you do, what you are doing today is a good thing, because we need to point to the values espoused by the leaders, those who are obligated or duty holders to interpret the Constitution in terms of Article 10, which requires that we must have participation, we must have inclusion, and those who are minority and marginalized within those wherever are supposed to be protected. It's well written there. Then we have Article Section 97 of the County Government Act, which actually gives 30% of those ones who are in minor in that county to have their voice. That one is normally ignored. So you find that like a county like Bungoma, we have the Sabaots there, we have the Bongomek and others. But you'll find that you hardly can get that right. And because, again, you don't have the numbers, you are not represented in the county government to make the noise that is necessary. So those people keep on remaining at the margin. Doing about this.
Yes.
As the National Caucus, we have declared that every ethnic community that is marginalized, because not all minority communities are marginalized. We have communities that are well endowed, like Asians. They're economically well up, so they will not be having issues. Actually, they can, by their own economic sense, they can be included. They have their ways of getting there. But there are communities that unless in appointive or elective something happens, they cannot get their space there. So what we are doing is we want to encourage all community leaders, because every leader, we have people like Professor here, and those that don't have, at least they have people who speak for them.
Okay.
And so we want to call them, and the registration that we have makes every community to be a branch. And so we want to have issues of governance, we have issues where we have leadership on the ground, and they can speak at the county level up to the national level. And with the president appointing the office under his own authority, we believe that our voice is going to be heard to the highest office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daktari, we're talking about, yes, the legislations are there, the policy, the laws are there, but it seems to be lacking in some areas. So as an organization, what have you done? Do you have policies and frameworks that you're proposing, not just to Parliament, but to the office that is situated within the office of the President? Do you have substantive policies at hand that you will front come December?
That's not actually where I was as a National Council. It's not an organization as such. It is part of the government. It is a government saga, state. So they have their own policy of targeting those National Council, those pastoralist committees, hunters and gatherers, and fishing folks. And then urban Islam, even some places where they have completely marginalized from the set of education. That is what is. But as concerned now, coming back to our framework here, this is a good initiative which was started by the president. And you know, you can't, you are born today and then you run tomorrow. It can't. So everything is gradual. As we are now, there is a lot of development which is taking place. One, we have formed for this minority group or communities. Secondly, we are coming up with a framework which will be included also in the budget, national budget, and Office of the President. We are waiting for that one. So thirdly, we are coming up with a policy to address this minority group. So you cannot come up with a policy without reaching out to these people where they are, how they are, and where do they live, and how are they living. What are their challenges? What are their achievements? How do we go about them to address those challenges? So unless you go to the grassroots, you cannot come up with a policy. And most of the time, the government or any organization comes up with a policy, but lacks implementation. So what we are asking now, if we come up and reach out, there's a task force which President promised. We reach out to the communities where they are, and address their challenges wherever they are. And we meet them one-on-one. After we have got their challenges, achievement, and how are the people from the county level, from constituency level, and how are this money being used to target them or addressing their challenges, we shall get all those information. It is like the task force on education, where the president later on addressed the issue, the national issue on education. But all in all, we must come up with a policy that is all-inclusive. Inclusive in the sense that we reach out to every minority community and marginalized, and to see what are the degrees of marginalization within this community. And we must also work with the county government. We must work with the national government. We must work also with the constituency level at the parliament, because it is where the laws are made. In the county, the executive and the county assembly make laws. The national make laws. Senate make laws. So we are targeting all these. Within that framework, we can come up with a policy. And that policy must address now the challenges of these minority and marginalized communities, and then we are able to address those policies. Secondly, on the same policy, unless probably you, from now unit, there is, we are being protected by executive order, presidential executive order number 2 by the president. As far as he's in power, we are protected. And he is a good person. He is the one who came up with this initiative, that he created even this unit. In Nairobi now, we know where our office is, among other offices. So we address this one. Then secondly, is an act of parliament. Unless you make a law through an act of parliament addressing the challenges of this minority and marginalized community, policies cannot come out just independently. Because policy emanates from an act of law or an act of parliament. And then from there now, you come up with a regulation. How to implement those policy, not policy, an act of parliament through a regulation. What are you going to do to elevate these people from bottom up? The bottom-up policy now comes in also in our case. So we address this issue from bottom up through that constitutional framework. So it is a matter of time. We give it time, but we have not done our homework. We have not done our homework because you cannot come up with a policy until you go to the ground. That is what is called public participation. So our public participation must start from the grassroots, not at a national level, must start from the grassroots. And then we embrace these ideas, and through this consultation, we are able to come up with a policy framework. And then from that policy framework or finding, then we can address those issues. This is how it should be done through an act of parliament. That is how it should be done.
Given that we're entering the final leg of our conversation, we're about to wind up. Let me start with you, Eric. As you wind up, tell us about, given that inter-community clashes has been there for a while, it has been witnessed over the years, what is the organizations that you represent or you work for or represent the people you work for have been doing about this as we wind up?
Thank you so much. Maybe so that I don't forget, I really wanted, and this being my last leg of the session, I think personally and on behalf of our communities also, we really thank the president so much, because it is his goodwill that has seen us here. And even what I said about there is nothing about us without us is something is implemented, because the director who is in minorities and marginalized affairs unit is himself from a minority group. So we know that we have that hope. But as he said, that is a goodwill of the president. What happens tomorrow when there's another person who doesn't recognize these people? Then that is where legislation now comes in. And I think about the conflicts in the regions. I come from the Marginalized community, and we occupy 15 locations in Baringo County, one in Laikipia and one in Nakuru. And we are really one of the communities which has been affected since 2005. We have lost almost 500 people to those conflicts, and we have lost a lot of wealth, and people have really been impoverished, families have been broken down. There's a lot of degeneration of our environment. So there is a whole host of things which need to be done. It cannot be done by us alone. This group, we are advocating, and we have to work with the government. And even areas where we have issues with the government, like those litigation issues, like even in Endorais, we took the government to AU, African Human Union, and People's Rights in Banjul. And there are decisions made on behalf of, in favor of the Endorais community. But 14 years down the line, nothing has happened. What I wanted to say is that even now, we don't want to have a combative engagement with the government. We want a very amicable solution at the table. What can we do? We also rational human beings. We can know what's not possible and what is possible. So what we are doing there is to promote the peace efforts together with other parties, even the NGOs, our leadership. We tell people, we encourage people to come together, and we also ask the governments at both levels to, at least if it is now like our side and our neighboring communities, then can you take water to them Can you take they develop pasture for them and also develop for us, so that these resource-based conflicts can be reduced. And we also find that for many years, I think the current government has really done a lot. I think you don't hear a lot of gunshots and a lot of reporting, even from our area in Baringo and all the way to Elgeyo Marakwet, Samburu, because there were around 5 counties around there. Now, we thought for a long time there were some forces we don't understand, because where do these cows go? If you take 1,000 cows during Sarana Mchana, and then it is not raining, it's not cloudy, and then you are told they are not seen. So we are now trying to say, can you work together with the government? Can you also get people who are, if there are bad elements amongst us, can you also single them out for the benefit of the good of all? So it is something I would say, it is a process, not an event. It is not something we can say, put it on, put it off. We have to work together, but we are really urging everybody through all the stakeholders to make sure that we have peace prevailing, and making sure that everybody has a cake of what should be there.
Okay, let me allow the Chair at least a minute to close this session for us. Chair, as we look upon the coming days, especially later this year on December, that given that we'll be converging in Bomas and the Minorities Day come August, what will be your last word in just 1 minute?
Actually, we have a checklist, and we are hoping that by that time, many of these issues will have been checked out. Of course, there is the issue of determination. Determination is in the Constitution, so that we have checked out.
Yes.
Affirmation that we exist is not in debate. That has been checked out. The issue of identification, which Dr. has mentioned and Eric has mentioned, that we need to deal with. Who is a minority and who is not a minority? So that we need to comfortably deal with it. It is still pending. The issue of promotion, we can say that the head of public service, Brother
Felix
Koskei, in many cases is always talking about make sure that the minorities are considered. That is promotion. We will wish that that can extend to many of the officers and county officers. The issue of protection and prevention. Once we are recognized, then we will need to be protected that we don't relapse back, because most of our people are invisible. They are not known. And what Eric was talking about, assimilation, as long as we have policies that allow assimilation to continue taking place, then the issue of prevention and protection still hangs, and we would like to deal with that. And that also, if you are not identified, then inclusion becomes a problem.
Okay.
So the issue of inclusion, it will still be hanging as we. Then in our values, we have the issue of development and advancement. That still hangs on who are you. If you are not properly identified, then those two cannot it will still be hanging. Then we have the issue of urgency, making sure that, you see now, like we are here, we are talking about our minority communities.
Yes.
So this is urgency, and we want it to go down to the grassroots.
Okay.
And also now these values, what you value is what you hold dear. Okay. I believe that KBC is trying to give value to minority and marginalized communities, and that's why we have this program. Okay. We would expect that this extends to different sectors, and in a sense, that is what I would say. As we go for that celebration, we'll be listing this and saying this has been done.
Okay, Chair. Thank you so much. That is the National Chair, Charles Nandein, of the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya, as well as Dr. Chris Galgalo. Thank you for making time, an educationist under the same umbrella as well, with Eric Kimalit, the community elder, in the same umbrella. Gentlemen, thank you for making time for us, and hopefully our dear viewers, whoever you're watching or wherever you're watching us from, hopefully the discussions have been fruitful. You can carry on the conversation both on and offline, given that we're set to mark the Minorities Day come August. In the second hour, we'll be talking about the finance bill as well as the budget. it. My guests have already arrived in studio. That is Professor Benjamin Koskei. He is also Dr. Benjamin Koskei, a governance expert. Oscar Omondi, a political analyst, is already here. Philip Pande, youth inclusion advisor, as well as an economist, is also here. And James Chwanya, a tax manager from PKF, will be carrying on the conversation. We're taking a short commercial break. Don't go too far.